The silence in that elevator was so thick I could feel it pressing against my chest. My mother stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the polished steel doors like she was daring them to open faster. She hadn't said a word since the lobby. Not since the moment the front desk attendant smiled at me and said, "Welcome back, Dr. Mercer. Conference room A is ready for you." She had looked at me then, really looked at me, and something shifted in her expression. Not pride. Something harder than that. Something I had spent 32 years trying to understand. I pressed the button for the 14th floor and watched the numbers climb. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because this story doesn't start in that elevator. It starts in a kitchen in Dayton, Ohio on a Tuesday morning when I was 17 years old. I remember the exact smell of that kitchen, burnt coffee and dish soap. My mother, Patricia, was standing at the counter reading the mail. She had a particular way of holding envelopes she didn't like. She'd pinch them between two fingers like they were something that might contaminate her. That morning, she was holding my AP chemistry test. 91, she said. Not a question. An indictment. I studied all weekend, I said. I was already pulling my backpack onto my shoulder, already preparing my exit. Your cousin Daniel got a 98 on his SATs. Practice test. She set the paper down flat on the counter, smoothed it with her palm. He's going to Northwest Winter. Pre-med. Did I tell you that? She had told me. 3 times that week. Mom, I got the highest score in my class. She picked up her coffee mug. That's a small class. That was Patricia. That was the language she had spoken to me my entire life. Fluent in the dialect of almost good enough, almost impressive, almost worth mentioning. My father had left when I was 9. He sent birthday cards until I was 12, and then even those stopped. So it had always been just me and Patricia in that kitchen in Dayton. And Patricia had a vision for what a daughter should look like. That vision looked a lot like her sister's kids. It looked like Daniel, who was pre-med. It looked like Rebecca, who had married a cardiologist at 26. It did not look like me. Quiet, too serious, more interested in molecular biology textbooks than sorority rushes. I got a full scholarship to Ohio State. Patricia told people it was Ohio State because of the financial situation. She said it the way you'd say someone took the last seat on a bus. As though I had settled. As though I had no other choice. I didn't correct her. I had learned early that correcting Patricia was like arguing with weather. What I didn't tell her was that I had also been accepted to Johns Hopkins. I deferred. I had a plan, and the plan required patience. I was good at patience. I had been practicing it my whole life. College was the first time I understood what it felt like to be seen. My biochemistry professor, Dr. Putter Alton, stopped me after the second lecture of freshman year. She was a small woman with reading glasses, perpetually pushed up on her head, and the kind of energy that made a room feel like it was leaning forward. You asked the right questions today, she said. Most students ask me what's going to be on the test. You asked why the mechanism works the way it does. That's different. That matters. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't used to someone noticing the right things. I threw myself into research. By sophomore year, I was working in Dr. Alton's lab. By junior year, I had co-authored a paper on enzyme inhibition that got published in a journal I had been reading since I was 15. The night it went live, I sat in the university library and read my own name in print 3 times. I texted my mother a link to the article. She replied 40 minutes later, "That's nice, honey. Did you eat dinner?" I put my phone face down on the table and went back to work. I graduated summa cum laude. Patricia came to the ceremony. She brought my Aunt Carol, Daniel's mother. During the reception, I overheard them talking near the punch bowl. "She's going for a PhD now," Patricia said. Her voice had that particular flatness it got when she was presenting facts she found inconvenient. "In what?" my aunt asked. "Biochemistry. Molecular something." A pause. "I don't really understand what she does." "Daniel just matched at Cleveland Clinic," my aunt said. "Cardiology fellowship." "Oh, that's wonderful," my mother said, and her voice warmed by 3 full degrees. I could hear it from across the room. I got a second plate of food and found a different corner to stand in. Graduate school at Johns Hopkins was the hardest 5 years of my life and also the best. I won't pretend it was glamorous. It was years of failed experiments and grant applications and 2 a.m. restarts and the specific loneliness of being the only person awake in a building full of equipment that was smarter than you. There were weeks I ate rice and canned soup and told myself this was temporary, that I was building something. I called my mother on Sundays. She told me about Daniel's patients, about Rebecca's new house, about her neighbor's son who had just made partner at a law firm downtown. She asked how my science stuff was going. I told her it was going well. She said that was good. She never asked what I was working on. I was working on a novel drug delivery mechanism for pancreatic cancer treatment. I was working on something that, if it went where I thought it was going, could change how oncologists treated one of the deadliest diagnoses in medicine. But it was science stuff. So, I defended my dissertation on the Thursday in April. Dr. Alton, who had followed me to Hopkins as my advisor, shook my hand afterward and said, "You know this is just the beginning, right? What you've built here is the foundation. The real work starts now." I walked out of that building in the rain and called my mother. "I passed," I said. "Oh, good," she said. "So what happens now? Do you get a job?" "I'm starting a research position at Meridian Biotech in San Francisco. I'll be leading a team." A pause. San Francisco is expensive. "It is," I said. "Daniel is thinking about opening his own practice. Did I tell you that?" I stood in the rain for another minute after we hung up. I wasn't sad. I want to be clear about that. I had long ago stopped needing her to understand. But every now and then, the gap between what I had built and what she was able to see would yawn open underneath me, just for a moment, and I would feel the old vertigo. Then I would close it back up and keep moving. 3 years into my position at Meridian, something happened that changed the trajectory of everything. Our trial results came back. I had been running a phase 2 clinical trial for 18 months. Our drug delivery compound, the one I had started sketching out in a Hopkins lab at midnight, being tested in patients with advanced pancreatic cancer. Patients who had already exhausted most options, patients whose oncologists were running out of things to try. The data came through on a Wednesday morning. I was sitting at my desk with coffee I hadn't touched yet and a spreadsheet that had been loading for 6 minutes. My research coordinator, Jamie, knocked on my glass door and opened it without waiting. "The numbers are in," Jamie said. I looked at the screen. I don't have adequate language for that moment. I've tried to describe it to people, and I always come up short. It wasn't euphoria exactly. It was more like confirmation. Like something I had believed in the abstract suddenly became solid and real and undeniable. The response rates were extraordinary. The side effect profile was manageable. The survival data was still preliminary, but the trend was there, unmistakable. Jamie was crying. I noticed that distantly. She was standing in my doorway crying, and I was sitting very still, looking at the numbers and thinking about all the Tuesday mornings in that Dayton kitchen, where my mother had held my test scores between 2 fingers. I thought, she can't take this away from me. Not because I wanted to show her, I was past that, but because in that moment I understood the full weight of what I had been carrying, the years of almost enough, of being invisible to the one person who should have seen me clearest, and I understood that none of it had stopped me. Not one bit of it. I picked up the phone and called Dr. Alton first. Then I called my mother. "We got our trial results today," I said. She said. She was watching something on TV. I could hear it in the background. "They're very good results. It's for a pancreatic cancer treatment." "That's good," she said. "Is that the thing you've been working on?" "Yes, for 7 years." "Well, that's nice. That must be a relief." A pause. "Are you coming home for Thanksgiving?" "Daniel and Rebecca are both going to be there." I stared at my ceiling for a long moment. "I'll let you know," I said. The call from the Heller Foundation came 6 weeks later. The Heller Prize is not something most people outside of biomedical research have heard of. Inside the field, it is the kind of recognition that redefines a career. It is awarded once every 2 years to a researcher whose work represents, in the committee's words, a meaningful and demonstrable advance in the treatment of human disease. Past recipients included names I had been reading in journals since high school. They wanted me to come to Chicago for the award ceremony. Black tie. Keynote address in front of 1,200 people. I called my mother because she was still my mother and I still called her. "I'm receiving the Heller Prize," I said. "It's a major award in my field. The ceremony is in Chicago in February. I'd love for you to come." A pause. "What does that involve?" she asked. "A dinner. A ceremony. I give a speech." "Is it formal?" "I don't really have anything formal. I can help with that," I said. Another pause. "Is Daniel invited?" "He's been doing really remarkable work at the clinic, you know. They just featured him in a local magazine." I breezed in slowly. "No, Daniel isn't invited. It's for my work." She came. I want to give her that. Whatever else she was and whatever she couldn't do, she came. I picked her up from O'Hare on a Friday afternoon. She was wearing her good coat and carrying the same rolling suitcase she'd had since I was in middle school. She looked older to me than the last time I'd seen her, and smaller somehow. And for a moment in the arrivals hall, I saw her before she saw me, and I felt something complicated move through my chest. Then she spotted me, and the first thing she said was, "You cut your hair." "A little," I said. "I liked it longer." She kissed my cheek. "You look tired. Are you sleeping?" "I'm sleeping fine." We drove to the hotel. She asked about traffic, about whether it was always this cold in Chicago in February, about whether the hotel had room service. She told me about Daniel's magazine feature. She told me about Rebecca's kitchen renovation. I listened. I drove. I had a speech to give tomorrow, and I ran it through in my mind, quietly, behind everything else. That night we had dinner with several of my colleagues. Dr. Alton was there, flown in from Baltimore, 2 members of my research team, a senior partner from Meridian. Everyone was warm, excited, generous with their attention toward my mother. Dr. Alton said, "You must be incredibly proud. What your daughter has done, the lives this research is going to affect." My mother smiled. "She's always been very dedicated," she said. It was the nicest thing she knew how to say. I understood that. I'm not sure she knew it was the smallest thing in the room. The next morning was when it happened. The one that I had been waiting for, in some sense, my whole life, though I hadn't known what shape it would take. We were in the lobby of the conference center, arriving for the pre-ceremony reception. I was wearing the dress I had bought for this specific occasion. Black, simple, the kind of thing that lets the context do the talking. My name badge read, Dr. Thura, Elena Mercer, 2025 Heller Prize recipient. My mother was beside me looking at her phone. A man approached us. Expensive suit. The particular confidence of someone who has been important for a long time and expects rooms to adjust around him. I recognized him. Richard Greer, a hospital system executive, one of the evening's major donors, the kind of man who had opinions about research funding and expressed them loudly at dinners. He looked at me. Then he looked at my badge. Then he looked at my mother. "Patricia," he said. He knew her somehow. I would learn later it was through a charity board she sat on back in Dayton. "What are you doing here in Chicago?" "My daughter," she said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "She's receiving some kind of award tonight. Is that right?" He glanced at me with the polite disinterest of someone humoring a child's recital. "What field?" "Biomedical research," I said. He turned back to my mother. "Patricia, you have to meet my wife. She was just asking about the Dayton Arts Gala. I think you know the..." He steered her gently by the elbow. My mother let herself be steered. I stood there for a moment, alone, holding my reception program. And then I heard my name. Not from my mother. From across the lobby. Dr. Mercer. A woman was walking toward me with the focused energy of someone on a mission. Dr. Sarah Okafor, chair of the Heller Foundation, one of the most respected figures in oncology research in the country. She had flown in from London for this ceremony. "I wanted to find you before everything started," she said, extending her hand. "I chair the selection committee. We read your phase 2 data 3 times. I've been in this field for 30 years, and I will tell you directly, what you've built is going to become the new standard of care. Not might, will." She held my hand in both of hers. "There are patients alive today who won't be dead in 5 years because of this. I wanted to say that to you before it gets loud in there." I don't know exactly what my face did. Whatever it did, she must have read something in it. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes," I said. And I was. I genuinely was. "Thank you." That means more than you know." She squeezed my hand and moved on. I turned around. My mother was standing 6 feet away. She had drifted back from Richard Greer's orbit and was standing very still, holding her small clutch purse in both hands, and she was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before in 32 years. She had heard all of it. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just looked at her and she looked at me, and something that had been very tightly coiled between us for a very long time came quietly. Finally, undone. Her mouth opened. Then closed. "Elena," she said. and her voice was different. I can't describe it precisely except to say that it had lost something. Some protective layer, some careful distance she had always kept between herself and the full truth of who I was. "We should go find our seats," I said gently. "It's almost time." I gave my speech to 1,200 people that night. I had written and rewritten it over 6 weeks, and somewhere in the final draft, I had stopped thinking about what would sound impressive and started thinking about what was actually true. So I talked about Tuesday mornings in Ohio. I didn't name my mother. I didn't name anyone. But I talked about what it meant to build something when you weren't sure anyone could see what you were building. About the particular loneliness of caring deeply about work that the people closest to you couldn't quite make sense of. About patients I had never met who were the reason I kept rerunning experiments that kept failing until the one time they didn't. 1,200 people were very quiet while I spoke. When I finished, they were not quiet anymore. I walked back to my seat. My mother was in the third row. As I passed her, she reached out and caught my wrist, not dramatically, quietly. Her fingers closed around my arm, and she held on for just a moment. I covered her hand with mine. I didn't need an apology. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't what I needed from her. What I needed was something much simpler. Something I suspect she had always struggled to give, to be witnessed. To have her see me clearly, even once, without the filter of comparison or competition or whatever fear it was that made her keep me at arm's length all those years. She saw me that night. I could feel it in the way she held my wrist. It wasn't everything. It wasn't 32 years of missing moments given back. But it was real. And it was hers to give. And she gave it. That was enough. It had to be enough. It was. In the elevator the next morning, riding down to check out, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, without looking at me, "I didn't understand what you were doing. All these years, I didn't understand it." "I know," I said. "That woman last night, Dr. Okafor," she said. She stopped, started again. "She said you were going to save lives that you already had." "That's what the data suggests," I said. My mother nodded slowly, the way you nod when you're absorbing something too large to process quickly. The elevator doors opened. We walked through the lobby together, our rolling suitcases making the same rhythm on the marble floor. At the door she stopped and turned to me, and for a moment she looked exactly like herself. The woman from that kitchen in Dayton, older now, standing in the cold light of a Chicago winter morning, seeing her daughter for the first time. "I'm proud of you," she said. It was 4 words. They were 32 years late. They landed anyway. I hugged her, and I meant it, and we walked out into the cold together. That was 2 years ago. Last month, the FDA granted accelerated approval to the compound my team developed. It will begin reaching patients within the year. My mother called me the day the news broke. She had seen it on her phone, an article in a mainstream outlet, the kind of thing she actually reads. She called me before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. "I saw the news," she said. "About your medicine." "It's a big day," I said. "I told Carol," she said. "My aunt, Daniel's mother. I told her what you did. I explained it to her." A pause. She didn't know. A lot of people didn't know. "They'll know now," I said. I could hear something in her voice that I had waited a long time to hear. Not performance, not deflection, just a woman who was proud of her daughter and was finally learning to say so. "Elena," she said. "Yeah, Mom. I'm sorry it took me this long to see you." I looked out my window at the San Francisco morning, the bay flat and silver in the early light, and I let myself feel the full weight of that sentence. Not with bitterness, but with something cleaner. Something like peace. "I know you are," I said. "I love you." "I love you too," she said. "I always did. I just wasn't very good at showing it." "I know that too," I said. We talked for 45 minutes, about the research, about what comes next, about whether I was eating well, and whether San Francisco was still as cold in the mornings as she remembered from her one visit 3 years ago. She asked what I was working on next. It was the first time she had ever asked that. I told her. There is a law that quietly governs every life whether we acknowledge it or not a law written in any book or handed down by any institution, but one that plays out, with patience, in the lives of every person who has ever chosen to build something real in the dark, without applause, without an audience. What you put in, you get back. Not always quickly, not always in the form you expected, but always. Elena didn't set out to prove her mother wrong. That's the part I want you to hold on to. She wasn't driven by spite or by the hunger for a moment of triumph. She was driven by something quieter and far more durable. A deep, unshakable belief that the work mattered, that the problem was worth solving, that somewhere out there were patients who needed what she was building, even if no one in her immediate world could see it yet. That is what integrity looks like before it gets rewarded. It looks like running an experiment that fails for the fourth time and starting again. It looks like publishing a paper that your mother doesn't read. It looks like driving to an award ceremony next to the person who once called your life's work science stuff and choosing, consciously, not to be bitter about it. And that choice, that daily, unglamorous, uncelebrated choice to keep your character intact regardless of whether anyone is watching, is what made the moment in that lobby possible. Not the prize. Not the title. The character that had been quietly compounding for 32 years. Intelligence alone doesn't build what Elena built. There are intelligent people who stop when it gets hard, who redirect their gifts toward easier validation, who need the approval to come first before they're willing to commit. Elena didn't need the approval to come first before they're willing to commit. She committed anyway in a kitchen in Dayton where her test scores were held between two fingers like something distasteful, and she never stopped committing. That is what resilience actually is. Not the dramatic recovery. Not the comeback speech. It's the Tuesday mornings when you keep going without any particular reason to believe that Tuesday will be different from Monday. It's the compounding of small, consistent choices made in the direction of what you believe is true and good and worth doing. And what happens when you live that way for long enough, with enough honesty and enough discipline? Reality eventually catches up. It has to. It has no other choice. Patricia didn't change because Elena demanded it. She changed because she witnessed something that could not be explained away, could not be compared to a cousin's magazine feature, could not be diminished into nice honey. The truth of who her daughter was finally became too large, too loud, too undeniable to fit inside the small frame she had always used to hold it. That is the quiet justice of a life lived with integrity. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to announce it. You just have to keep building, keep showing up, keep choosing the harder right over the easier small, and eventually the world adjusts its frame to fit you. Elena's story is not really about a prize. It's about what happens when a person refuses to let someone else's inability to see them determine what they become. That's the only story worth telling. And if any part of it felt familiar to you, if you recognized yourself in that elevator, or in that kitchen, or in the years of work that no one around you quite understood, then I want you to know something. Keep going. The work is real. The compound interest on integrity is real. The moment of being truly seen is coming. You don't have to force it. You just have to be ready for it when it arrives.